I V M.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Vishal Gondal Show. And today's episode is really special because the guest who I'm going to be having on the show is actually not just a guest, but a very, very close friend of mine. We have spent hours and hours together roaming the streets of New York. We have gone to many, many restaurants, discussed a lot of things about life. And his own life story is so inspiring, and yet not many people know about him. He learned the art of selling and making profit. Yes, I'm talking the word profit when he was only 10 years old. By the time he was 14, he was running. Yes, he was running a business of selling HMV records. He then migrated to the US and from working literally at minimum wage, he now runs a very, very big enterprise. He's a very successful entrepreneur. He has literally a room full of cars, whether it is a Ferrari or a Bentley or a Tesla. Every time I go to the US, I find him driving a new car. And of course, this is not something which he's flaunting. I think for him, this is all about the one thing which he loves to do, which is hustling. So he's a hustler, and that's exactly what is going to be the title of a book, which I'm sure he's going to write pretty soon. So once again, welcome to the show. None other than Taj Haslani. Hi Taj, how are you doing?
Hi Vishal, good to be on your show. I have listened to all of your episodes, and I actually feel embarrassed, Vishal, the pedigree of people you have, the guest you had, and now you bring me in. I just embarrassed actually. I told you also when you were here last week with me. This is the first time I'm opening up my life on a public platform. So there I am here, Vishal, all yours.
No, that's exactly the point, right? Your success story is not known to many. And like I always say, right, that I know you may have come from Alibag, but there are a lot of smart people from Alibag. And I think one other thing is that also shows how humble you are, right? I mean, while you think your story is not inspiring, I can tell you all the stuff you've been able to do. Even if one person can be inspired by that, I think that changes the game. So, so once again, please welcome to the show. And believe me, you are possibly one of the most amazing persons I'm going to be having on the show. And I think we'll see the response of this episode.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal.
So let's talk about, how you started working literally when you were 8 years old. And this was in Nizamabad, right?
Nizamabad.
So just tell us a little bit about your early childhood, right? Because it's completely coming out of a movie.
Sure. Well, I will take a step back prior to Nizamabad also, just to give you the backdrop of my parents. So my parents are from Gujarat. They are from Saurashtra, a very small town called Kamlapur. Probably nobody heard of it. My mom is also from Gujarat. They moved to Mumbai and then they moved to Alibag. And I was born in Alibag. And I always tell, I don't tell people that I was born in Alibag because people make fun of me, Alibag se aaya kya, right? They make degrade that thing. So, but I spent maybe only 2 years in Alibag, and then my father migrated to Tain, Panvel, Akola. So he had a whole journey of things, and then he settled in this town called Nizamabad, which is 100 miles from Hyderabad. So my schooling from lower KG started in Nizamabad. And I am one of the 4 siblings, and being the only son, it came upon me to go to the store with my father and help him when I was 7, 8 years old. So I started going to the store when I was very, very young. When people are playing goti and gilli danda, I was actually at the store cleaning the jadu, pota, everything. I have done everything in the store. Because my town was in the border of Maharashtra, and my parents' journey from Gujarat to Nizamabad at that time, it was Andhra Pradesh, now it is Telangana. So I have that influence of Gujarati, being mother tongue being Gujarati, little bit time spent in Maharashtra, so I can speak little bit Marathi. I can understand pretty much everything, and now I can speak, read, write Telugu also. So that gave me the edge when I was at the store, and my father did not speak Telugu, so I was the kind of front end person when a Telugu customers come, and my father will put me in the front saying that sell this radio to him, or sell this record to him. So so I always say that my education, have done a BCom bachelor's, not a big deal, but I have taken a 14 years MBA course. Now you might ask, what is 14 years? Which school offers 14 years MBA course, right? That's my father's education. I started at that 9, 10, and I worked with him up till like age of 24. So that's where I learned all my whatever work ethics you see, the kind of discipline I have in work, everything taught by my father. He was a very strict person. He's still a strict person, but everything I am today, whatever I learned about the business is through my father. So when I was 10, I was pretty much running the shop, and my father had a habit of taking 2 hours nap in the afternoon. So I have to be at store at that time all the time. And I always open the store early. He comes a little later. So there was a routine that I open store at 9 o'clock. He comes at 10. He leaves store at 2 o'clock, comes back at 4:30. So that was the routine. So in my schooling period also, when I went to the college, there are certain periods I never attended because I had to be at store. And my teachers did not even know me that I was part of that class. And when I got highest score in statistics, my teacher was looking for me where is this guy who got the highest score in statistics? Because he never saw me. So that's how I went to school, and I finished my school. So that's where my first education of selling, how to sell, how to convince. And I always had that ability that if somebody comes that I want to buy a Philips radio, I had an ability to sell whatever radio I wanted to sell them.
No, that's quite an art. You can sell, as we say, you can sell ice to an Eskimo. So
at that age, yes, ice to Eskimo is too far, but I was able to convince people. I was not pushy, but I earn their trust when I'm selling them, saying that this is the better value for money. Philips costs this much, this costs this much, and it's almost as good as Philips. So that's how I sold.
But how did people take an 8-year-old kid seriously, right? The question is not about what you sold them, but how were you able, because I presume people who are buying this were 20, 30, 40 years old.
Yeah.
So how would you convince somebody at 40 to listen to you?
So my father is always in my backdrop, right? So I'm just the front end person. So I'm just that front end salesperson talking to the person, because this senior person cannot talk that language so much. So I had a shadow of my father. So everybody looked at my father for the trust factor, but understanding what they are buying came from me because of the language barriers.
Oh, that's very interesting. And, again, we had the fortune of meeting your father just recently.
Yes.
It's amazing that, he still maintains that very beautiful smile.
Yes.
And when you were like 8, 10 years old, when you said he was very strict, what were the strictness? Because in today's world, when you are strict with kids, it's a very different kind of strictness. Could you kind of give some context to the people here? Ki kya hota tha?
Yeah, if my family listens to this podcast, they're gonna be yelling at me for opening up these things. But my father being strict, he used to give me a list of things when I go to Hyderabad to do the purchases for the shop. And I always had a rebel habit of bringing something more which was not part of the list. And he will always yell at me, "Ye kyun lekar aaya? Ye nahi bikega." And then I will take upon myself and I will sell that first before whatever he had in the list. So that rebellion attitude I always had, and he was ruthless in sometimes, that if I try to convince a customer too much, he will just ask me, "Ja baar baith ja chal." And there was like a small dabba like a thing outside the store, and I used to go there and sit and sulk there, saying that I was doing such a great job. Why he pushed me out of the store and not let me close the deal? So that kind of rebellion. It's other than that, my father was such a sweet person, but anything in business, it had to be done the way he wanted to do it, and I was always going beyond. So every time I come back from a purchasing trip, I know that I'm gonna get yelling.
That's amazing. But how did then you get the confidence to start your own store, the whole vinyl business which you then went into when you were just 14? How did that happen?
So, we were selling radios first, and then we became an HMV dealer. And then when we became HMV dealer, I used to go to Mumbai to do the shop purchasing for the records. So I used to get off at VT station, walk to the fort. That's where HMV, the distribution center, was there. So at that age of 12, 13, I was going by myself from Nizamabad to Mumbai in a train, changing trains at Manmad, and it's a 16-hour train ride, and stay in Mumbai for 6 hours and do all the purchasing and come back. So all that, being in that situation made me little hustler. As I said, I did not know how to go from one place to other place, and I did not have money. We come from a lower middle class. It's not that we were starving for the food, but in Mumbai, I cannot afford to take a taxi to go to my uncle's place to Mazgaon. So I used to take buses. So I still remember the bus numbers. The Mazgaon St. Mary's school, the bus number 3 goes to Fort from there. Bus number 10 Limited goes there. And if I had a lot of time, I will take bus number 126, which will take me a Mumbai Darshan and then go to the VD.
Wow.
I don't know if this bus numbers are still true or not, but I remember this bus numbers.
Yeah. And my favorite bus number, by the way, was 8 Limited bus, which used to go from Chembur to VT, and it used to, there was a very, you talked about a very limited bus and the regular bus, right? And we always wanted the limited bus, which was kind of funny.
Because it's an express. Limited bus is express, has a few stops.
Exactly. So you made a lot of these trips alone to Mumbai, but again, as a 13-year-old kid, how did your parents had the confidence कि no यार, we can send Taj अकेले to Bombay? Today kids don't even let them go अकेले, lift में भी डालने जाने नहीं देते बच्चों को तो.
हिंदी में कहावत है ना, मजबूरी का नाम महात्मा गांधी. We had no choice. One person has to be at store. So my father used to go to the purchases for Mumbai, and then he closed the store for one day, and he took me with him once, and then said that अभी आगे से you have to go. So he showed me how to get there, who to meet. I still remember all the representatives of the HMV names. I'm still connected to some of them actually, and they always treated me with a lot of love. When I go there, they always call, "Hey, Habib cha mulga ye le, Habib cha mulga ye le," then they will feed me food. They treat me with special treatment because I was so young, so naive, and I was trying to make a buck by doing all these things.
And it's really interesting that, this also reminded me of my own father. So he was in the iron and steel business, and then the market of iron and steel was in Lohar Chal.
Yeah.
This is one area again of, I think Lohar Chal was somewhere in Princess Street or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I remember he taking me so many times to this area. So in Bombay, there are these areas, right? There is Zaveri Bazaar, there is Lohar Chal, and there is garments. I think, so there were these very interesting areas where people used to go. So the HMV and this whole music ka bhi full area, like Lamington Road ke paas. There was
Lamington Road. I used to go to Lamington Road very often. There was a store called Cassette World. I used to go there a lot. I still know the owner of the Cassette World. His name was Majid Bhai.
Majid Bhai. By the way, I remember buying.
I know him very well.
So I remember buying a lot of things from Majid Bhai too.
Yeah, Majid Bhai, you can go and tell him my name, and he will recognize me as a little kid coming for the shopping.
No, I know. That's what I said. That brings amazing memories.
Yeah.
So you came all the way here, and then you started running this store, but then there was still some Kida in you, right? I mean, suddenly you decided all this, and then you started a computer training institute.
Yeah.
ये क्या हो रहा था?
So this is the turning point of my life, Vishal. that I was married. I got married very young at the age of 22, and I was dating my wife 6-7 years prior to my. So I had an early crush on my wife, and that's how we started. And after
so how did you get time to do all this? ये सब धंधा भी कर रहे हैं, बॉम्बे भी जा रहे हैं, डेट भी कर रहे हैं.
Yeah. It was a small town. No, it is everything like it's so compact. At that time, on a bicycle, I can go from one corner to another corner in 15 minutes. That's how small my town was. Abhi to shayad maybe it's a little bigger, but what happened is that I was running my father's store even after I got married, and I was sitting with my brother-in-law, my eldest sister husband, and we were discussing the business and everything. And somehow in a such conversation, I will paraphrase this. I don't know. I don't remember exactly how he said it, but I will paraphrase saying that, "Kya bada kaam kar raha, tere baap ki dukaan chala raha hai, tu kya kiya?" That's the kind of message he gave me. And that hit me so hard. I took it upon my heart, and you said, he's right, actually. I didn't start anything on my own. My father had a store, I'm running it. What a big deal, right? And that night I could not sleep, and next day morning I went to my father. I said, you know what? I will not come to store anymore. I want to do something on my own. I don't know what I want to do. Give me some time to figure that out. And I was fascinated about this NASA and Apollo 13 control center. And I always visualized myself surrounded by monitors, computers. And so that led me towards computer. And I started doing research. How can I get involved in computers? And then I found this one person in a small town near Nizamabad. It's called Adilabad. He had a computer training center, and he had franchised from a Chennai company called CompuTeach. If anybody is 50 plus years old, they might have heard this name. CompuTeach was a first computer training center franchise in India, by the way. There was no other. So I went to Chennai. Again, never been to Chennai. First time, their office was in T Nagar. I took a bus to T Nagar again. I went there. The office was in a house, but I still said okay. So they said for 45,000 rupees at that time in 84, for 45,000 rupees, you can take a franchisee. We will give you one computer in that price, and we will come and set up that computer for you.
Was it 84 or 94?
84.
84 mein computer.
Yeah.
So it must be one of those mainframes then, I guess.
I will tell you what computer is in a moment. So I came back to Nizamabad. I told my father, I need 50,000 rupees loan from you. And at that time, my 50,000 rupees was a lot of money for my father. And
no, for anybody.
He somehow said,
For anybody, right? 50,000 of that time is 20 lakhs today or maybe more.
Whatever, yeah. So he somehow very gracefully said, you know what? Even if you screw up, I don't mind. Take this money, do what you want. So he gave me 50,000 rupees. I took that money, went back to Chennai. And guess what computer they gave me? Apple IIe. With a green monochrome monitor with 64 kilobytes of RAM. KB, not MB, not GB. 64 kilobytes of RAM and one floppy drive, which is 128 kilobytes. That floppy drive is 5¼ inch size floppy drive. So no hard disk, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought that computer. The operating system was CP/M. Anybody knows what CP/M operating system, and it came with basic language only. So I started turning on the computer, and it took me 3 days to figure out that I have to format a disk to write something on the disk. So everything taught myself from the books, and then I started Computer Training Center teaching Microsoft Basic to people, and the company name was called Ruby Computers. My father had started a store called Taj Radio. So I just started my computer center with my daughter's name, Ruby Computers. That's how that Ruby Computers name came. And once I learned a little bit more and I created my own curriculum, I went to all convent schools in the area, and I started going to the schools and teaching computer classes there. And then I said that isse paid bharne wala nahi hai. Computer teaching was not so much money. It was okay. I was able to pay back my loan money to my father within 6-9 months very quickly. because initially there was a craze about computers and people paid good money for the training also. And then I said, you know what, let me learn programming. Then I learned DBase 2 programming. So there was a couple of books I bought on DBase 2. I went to Leamington Road. I got all the DBase software because pura pirated software udhar hi milta tha. And then I got all the software.
and I remember using DBase 3 Plus.
I used DBase 3, I used Clipper 87, Foxbase, Fox Pro, all of them I have used.
Exactly.
And I was one of the top-notch Clipper programmers in the country at that time. If you remember, there was a CompuServe bulletin board. And I was the one responding to everybody's Clipper's questions.
So I used to also code in Clipper, by the way. I have used Clipper.
All right.
I have used Clipper.
Nantucket, the company which owned Clipper was Nantucket, and then Computer Associate bought them and screwed it up.
I mean, clearly, so even, like Lotus 1, 2, 3, the early spreadsheets, WordStar, all these are history, right? I think nothing really survived from that era. But, it's interesting that, I've used pretty much all those softwares, and it's amazing that you were doing this. So you were literally a pioneer in even computer education as well as computer coding. So, you were doing well. You started a company here. Suddenly, what jhatka happened that you have to leave all of this and go to America? I mean, again, from all parameters, you were doing really well and you decided to move.
Yes. So I was really doing very well. So I want to finish my story of data processing. So I was going to all these BD factories in Nizamabad to give me some computer data processing work, because every factory had like 20,000, 30,000 BD rollers, and they have to do weekly payrolls.
Okay.
And nobody gave me any work. Then there were gas stations. So there is one gas station I vividly remember the name. It was called Kailash Kotaya gas station in town, and they used to supply gas to all police jeeps. So he gave me a work to sort out all the orders of gas filling by jeep numbers so that he can create an invoice for the police department. Mm-hmm. So he used to pay me 1,000 rupees per month, and the stationery was costing me more than 1,000 rupees to print those invoices. But I still did it because I wanted to prove that this can be done and there is a time saving in this. And then slowly BD Factory started giving me job, and I commanded everything. At that point, I was charging them 30,000 rupees retainer to be just available to them for any programming work. And I had like 10, 20 companies like that. So I bought my first Maruti car from those monies, from the BD Factory monies. So that's where. And then during this process, while I was doing all this computer center from 84 to all early 90s, some of my friends had been to US and settled down in US in the mid 80s. And in 88, 89, they came back, and I saw everybody's talking about big cars and big monies, and they're spending lavishly. So it was an envy factor. I said, you know what, I have to go and check out at least. So in 1990, my wife and I went to US just as a tourist. We went to the Raj Travels package tour, 15 days package tour. My wife was expecting my son, my third kid, and we decided to stay in US and deliver the baby in US. And after my son was born, within 30 days, we came back to India. And then once you come back, stay some time in US and go back to India, it's very difficult to settle down.
And where did you land in America?
I was in New York, proper New York.
Okay.
So I stayed with my friend in Queens, and I worked in Midtown. I told you 38th Street. I showed you that street also, 38th Street and 8th Avenue. It was a printing company called Midtown Print Company, $6 an hour. It was $6 an hour was at that point. That's what I needed to survive. Mm-hmm. So my expense was very limited. So I survived with that money.
No, but so with having already 2 kids, a family, you just decide sab kuch chhod ke you just go to America.
Yeah.
Didn't people tell you ki yaar ye sab, what are you doing? I mean, did nobody tell you anything, or everybody was like, yeah, absolutely, go leave India and go away? What was the general sentiment?
The sentiment was कि जाएगा वापस आ जाएगा, घूम फिर के वापस आ जाएगा. So nobody expected that I will survive here. Nobody expected that I will be successful. Forget about successful. Nobody thought I will survive here also. And yes, all my 3 kids and wife were in India for a year, and I was alone in US, staying as a paying guest with my friend. I did not even have.
And taking your wife when she was pregnant, right? That also was like a big. I mean, normally people will say, "Arey yaar, ruk jao, 1 mahina, 2 mahina, let the baby be delivered."
Yeah.
So what was the hurry for you to do this?
I just didn't want to waste any more time, Vishal, at that time. And somehow the mindset was like, okay, if my son was born in US and is a born citizen, I might have some benefit to go there again. That was the thought process, honestly. But that did not work out. I did not have full knowledge of it. There was no Google at that time to research. But I say, I thought that if my son was born there, I might get a green card, right? That was the wrong belief, and which was wrong, but ultimately turned out to be pretty okay. Then once you come back from US, then I could not survive in India. Mera dil nahi lag raha tha. Then I said, I have to go.
So do you remember that when you were going to America, did a lot of people come to leave you at the airport? Because I remember उस time पे कोई airport भी जाता था तो पूरी एक पलटन आती थी आपको छोड़ने के लिए.
नहीं, only my actually. Not many people, just 1 or 2 people.
And you flew from what, Bombay or Hyderabad?
Hyderabad.
Okay. So the Hyderabad, there was a direct flight or there was a...
No, it was Hyderabad to Delhi via Hyderabad, Mumbai, whatever it was.
Okay.
I think it was Hyderabad, Mumbai, London and New York.
Oh, wow. That was a long flight.
Yeah, it was a long flight.
So what is this whole thing? See, I know a lot of people who procrastinate, जो decision ले ही नहीं सकते, and I'm sure between you and me and especially today's youngsters, एक कॉलेज में एडमिशन लेने के लिए लोग इतना सोचते हैं, इतना रिसर्च करते हैं, पता नहीं क्या 1000 लोगों से पूछते हैं, and आप डायरेक्टली अमेरिका पहुंच गए ये सोचे बगैर कि करना क्या है, right? I mean, you just decided and you left there.
Yeah.
So what is the difference? Why is that mindset different between what you were doing and what today's generation is doing?
Like, it's a blessing in disguise. My brother-in-law challenged me. I think that was driving factor for me. I have this bad habit of trying to prove people wrong if they have any conception about me. So I will give another small example on a sidetrack. This Vipassana, 10 days meditation, right? I went in 2014, I went for Vipassana and all my kids were betting against me saying that, Dad, 2 दिन में वापस आ जाएंगे, Dad, 4 दिन में वापस आ जाएंगे. I suffered there so much. I did not like it at all, but just to prove my kids wrong, I stayed all 10 days.
This is incredible, right? So you go to do Vipassana not to silence your mind or meditate, but to prove somebody else wrong.
That I can do it. If I make up my mind, I can do it.
No, but you didn't do it. I mean, the whole concept of Vipassana is that for 10 days you are disconnected and you're not doing it, right? So
I'm definitely disconnected. So I have to go through that process eventually, right? But the reason was wrong. I agree that the reason I stayed there was wrong. If there was no challenge from my kids, I would have come back in 3 days.
Achha, got it. So is that your personality then? Is that what you're saying? Your personality is when somebody challenges you, you want to go and prove them wrong.
Now thinking of that, yes, that sounds true to me. I did not think like that ever before, but now you're saying, and I'm also saying, so it's a subconscious saying also. So yeah, that could be a major factor in what I do.
That's amazing. And but that's a whole lot of other people are also challenged and wo बोलते ki farak panda hai, right? So there is the other theory where you keep saying, like कि यार तुम कर क्या रहे हो अपनी life से, but the other thing is यार की farak panda hai, मैं कुछ नहीं करूँगा, कर लो तुमको जो करना है.
No, I think, as I said, I was giving you an example of this. I went to this design thinking course in Harvard, and it was only 3 days course, by the way. And one of the final day that the instructor asked everybody, if somebody writes in a biography on your life, what will be the title of your book? And I was the first one to respond. And this question was never asked to me, and I had never thought about this. And instantly, the title, The Hustler, came to my mind. And I said, the title of my biography is going to be The Hustler, because I think I've hustled all my life from the childhood.
But hustling is a negative connotation. Normally people think hustling is not good. Mm-hmm. But you've been always able to hustle in a positive way, except let's leave the meditation part outside your hustling. So what is the difference between, what generally people talk about hustling and what you think about hustling?
So if you remember the Wall Street movie, there is a very famous dialogue called "Greed is good." So greed can be good, greed can be bad. Hustling for wrong reason could be bad. Hustling for a good reason is a competitiveness. So to me, it's a fine line between. It's not a fine line actually. Competitiveness and hustling goes side by side. You have to be competitive to be a hustler, right? So it's an inbuilt nature. Anything you do to satisfy something, it could be your ego also. Ego can be a good and ego can be bad also. Ego for a good reason could be a good ego. Like a good greed, there could be a good ego also. So if you have mindset that this is where I want to go and you don't know where to start, trust me, there are people will come in your life and they will guide you there. If you're surrounded by the right people and if you're not afraid or ashamed to ask for help, there is so much help out there. I cannot tell you how many people at different points of my life have helped me, which I have zero connection, zero relationships in the past. The guy who did a green card for me, I have never met him in person.
Wow.
So there's a stranger who came in my life and he says like, no, you're working here, you have a difficulty with your green card. Don't worry, I will file your green card. And I filed a green card from a company in Atlanta. I never met this person ever. Even now, I never met this person. So if you are willing to do, and if your reasoning is good, there are certain ways. God has a mysterious way of bringing people in your life. Like you came in my life. I had come to Mumbai for one day. If you remember that IIT event, Vulture's Nest, I came at like 3 o'clock in the night, and next day night again I had a flight back. So I came to that event. So God, there was some superpower in play for us to get connected at that time.
Yeah, and that is almost, I think it's over 10 years ho gaya, but I don't even remember kab ki baat.
Yeah, more than 12, 13 years now.
12, 13 years, yeah.
It was 2009, I think.
So Taj, do you believe in luck? Do people call you lucky?
So it's a very challenging question. Actually, I have seen you asking this, and I know answers of a lot of people who gave on your show. I don't want to give a cliche answer here. I will say luck. Instead of luck, I would say that angels watching your back. If you do karma, I think it starts with karma. Hard work is the first 95% of what you accomplish. The last 5-10% are the angels watching you. And you can call that as a luck. You can paraphrase that as a luck, but there are mystery people in my life who came and they got me out of a soup in many cases. Was that luck? Probably, yes. But I believe in karma. I totally believe in karma. My dad has always taught me, the way he educated me about the money, कि पहले जिसको देने का है दे दो, right? First you have to pay anybody. Once you get money, pay off that person. And then there is a very good Marwadi kahavat, right? About money. पहले लिख, फिर दे. So first write down what you are paying and then give the money. If you have to take the money, पहले ले, फिर लिख. So you don't forget one part of the action. So all these little lessons I got from my father, I still use them.
Wow. So you still maintain a diary where you're writing all these things?
No, I have obviously computer now, right? But I don't have that penny. I don't match my balances to the penny. I used to match with my father. Even penny has to match.
Wow, even pennies have to match, huh? That is quite.
And just one small story about that, my father. So he used to give me a diary, and at that time he used to give me 5 rupees for my pocket money, which was a lot of money. And then he said, like, every time you spend money, you write down and then show me the balance, and he will randomly check and say, show me your diary balance and show me actual money. Right? And it has to match.
Wow.
So if sometimes the money is less, maybe I forgot to write something, he will let me go. But if money is more than what's in the diary, that's ultimate. That means I did something wrong. Kahin se paisa churaya ya kisi ko nahi diya. That's what he will think, and that will be the worst day of my life.
Wow. So if there is more money with you than which is in the accounts, that's a red sign.
That's a red sign that I did something wrong.
Wow. But I think that's...
So you cannot have more money. You cannot have more money than in your books, right?
Yeah, exactly. Wow. That's an amazing lesson, right? And not many people know about this or even think about this from
No.
that context, right?
So
So
imagine, like, your bank, you have somehow extra money than your computer tells. What do you think? Where that money came from, right?
yeah, clearly
Something
not
went
the
wrong
right
with the
source.
bank entry, or somebody deposited and you did not record it. That's even worse than having less money in your bank.
Yeah. So you literally left India right before the liberalization, like the liberalization started in
Yes.
94, 95,
Yeah.
and you possibly left before that.
I left in 92.
92, you left before that. So on the hindsight, do you ever think कि यार अगर आप इंडिया में ही रहते, if you had not left India, what would have been where would you be today?
So I love India. I was born, everything I am today is because of my education, my culture in India. But I have one negative connotation for India also, that coming from a small town, unless I had a political influence, I don't think I would have been successful there. I don't know if you agree with me on that context or not, but coming from a small background, and I have seen that taking a government contracts in my town, I always had to go to the MLA of my town saying that, please mera recommendation laga do, right? And the habit of bribing people in the government department, it just crushed me. I say, like, it just made me feel so bad about myself that I'm not worth getting this money, that I have to bribe this person to get my money back from this department. And I just don't want to use this word, but I will just say it because I want your listeners to understand how I think. It felt me like I am a pimp. Like, कि रिश्वत दे के काम कराना, I felt like I was a pimp. And I felt horrible about that. And I don't think that has much changed. So it would have been great if I was coming from a wealthy family and had money to invest in startups. I would have been much better in India. But coming from where I came from, I think this country gave me the whole lot opportunity. And if you talk to any of your friends in US, I think the 80-90% people will say the same thing, that the opportunity this country gave, I don't think I would have gotten that in India.
No, but US also has its own set of problems, right? I mean, there is racism, there is all other evils in the US, in that society, and corruption also exists in a different form, not like India. But how did you manage those issues, right? Because I'm sure you would have encountered a lot of that, and for example, when I talk to Vikas Khanna, our common friend, he talks a lot about the challenges he faced as a Indian chef in New York. And here you were a brown person in America, and that time India was not really known for software. So after 2000, I think that was the Y2K was really the turning point for Indian software.
Right.
But you were much earlier, right?
Right. So fortunately, I did not face that much difficulty because of my skin color. I think there is an edge. If you're good at what you do, obviously they will have some enviness against you, and they will show off sometimes. But if you do your good work, I think you can overcome that. But I cannot say that there is absolutely no discrimination. There is, but you can play that discrimination to your advantage. There are ways you can do that. There are associations of diversified business owners. There is a councils of diversity owners of the companies, and you can get special treatment if you're a diversified in US. So all the big companies in staffing industry, like many Indian-owned companies, they get diversity certified and they get special treatment by big companies like JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, and all these big companies.
But isn't that equal to reservation in India, right? You have reservation here.
It is pretty much similar. But here it's to our advantage. There is no disadvantage to that. It's a shortcut to get doing business with JP Morgan Chase if you're a diversity certified company. So in general, there is a discrimination, but if you know how to handle the people, if you learn, there is an art to deal with local people. I have to say this. You have to boost their ego a little bit, obviously. I don't want to say that it's a chaplacy, but there is an art to work with these people. And if you know how to deal with, all my companies CEOs were white people, always. I never was the CEO of my own companies. I always kept the white CEO in front so that I don't have to, take,
But
affected.
it's isn't it the same as saying that, listen, I don't like to bribe, but I would have other people who would then do whatever it takes to get the work done. I mean, isn't that the same thing to say, right? That
See, it's on the same line. It's not much different, but bribing is completely you're going against your conscience.
No, I'm just giving an example. I didn't mean bribing. I'm just saying that what you tried to do was to kind of not deal with these issues. You got local CEO, like you said, you got a white CEO, for example.
Yeah.
But again, in the 90s, May, how was America? Because I remember New York was filled with crime. And, of course, by the way, my first trip to the US was actually 1998. So, of course, I came much later to America.
Yeah.
And I went to New York. But that time you were scared walking on the road.
The 42nd Street was the scariest part. There were all peep shows and adult stores everywhere on the 42nd Street. You could buy any drugs on 42nd Street. That was how bad. Rudy Giuliani changed that as a mayor of New York. He changed everything. But look, I worked in World Trade Center most of my life in downtown area. Was I in a danger zone? No, I was never in an area which was dangerous to walk also. There were bad areas like 42nd Street, Bronx. These were known to be bad areas. I never had to go to those places. In fact, mid-90s was the best time to come to US because of that pre-Y2K thing. It was so easy to get settled down here.
And finally, how did you get your citizenship there? You had to do some hustling to get that also, right?
So there is again sub-story there. When I came to this country, I came on my B1 regular tourist visa. And I wanted to work, so nobody gave me work. And I was running out of that $500 what RBI gave me, allowed me to bring to this country. I ran out of that money very quickly. And there were days that I did not have money to buy a subway token for $1. And I had to walk 150 blocks in Manhattan in one day. So there is a good friend of mine. He guided me to get a political asylum. So at that time, it was easy to apply for a political asylum, and then it gives you the work permit. And once I got the work permit, I got the job. And then once I got the job, I convinced my employer to change my visa status to H1. Then I had this friend's friend in Atlanta who filed my green card. So I got a green card from there. And once you have a green card, in 5 years, you can apply for a citizenship. It's a very straightforward, just apply and get the citizenship.
So do you remember the day when you got your citizenship and what changed for you, the day before and the day after you got your citizenship?
So citizenship was not a big change, but green card was a big change. Because until you have a green card, you are kind of slave to the company who holds your H1. So I worked for $32,000 salary for 3.5 years, the company which was holding my H1. I never negotiated my salary, never asked for a raise. So surviving in a $32,000 salary with wife, not working, homemaker, and 3 kids. She's taking care of 3 kids. I'm doing work at $32,000. It was very, very difficult time. And my wife honestly had a budget of $300 a month for entire groceries for entire month at that time. And she had to manage, and she went from one store to other store to save 5 cents on a milk or 10 cents on a juice. So that's how we survived. And I used to find the jobs on weekends where I can work on cash. So I started teaching on the weekends. But the day I got my green card, I finished my green card interview and my passport got stamped in Newark office. And I told my wife, you go home. And that is the first day I took my first vacation day or sick day from that job in 3.5 years. 3.5 years, I did not take a single sick day or a vacation day. That day only I took the day off. I went back to the office. I said, you know what? I'm resigning now. I got my green card. I don't need you anymore.
Wow. That's amazing. So
yeah. But my boss is still my friend.
Okay.
The boss I used to work on my first job is still, I did it very gracefully. It was not that cutthroat. I did it very gracefully. Everybody in that company I worked, all are my friends even now.
So when you quit that company, you directly started your business.
I started consulting myself. So at that time, Power Builder was very popular and I was a Power Builder developer at that time. So I easily got in a consulting job. And within 2 years, I started my company where I started placing people. So when you're consulting, people will say, hey, do you know anybody like you who can do the same job? Then I started looking for people, or I knew people and I started placing them while consulting. So when I placed my first 10 consultants and I had enough profit from those 10 consultants to replace my own consulting fees, then only I quit the job, consulting also. Then I became a full-time operator of a staffing company.
It's interesting, right? This is, I know the word was used was body shopping, right? ये पूरे India की IT companies यही कर रही थी, right? They were hiring people from here and placing it in America. And what you were doing is the same thing, but the only difference is you were sitting in America itself.
And I was hiring people only in America. I was not bringing people from India even at that time.
Okay. So that was the difference. So you were sourcing locally rather than sourcing from India itself.
Yeah.
And tell me something, in this entire, your transition to starting a business, didn't ever somebody ask you that, how can you do this? What is your qualification? Were people just like, you just go and people are signing up? How did you convince somebody to give you business?
That is the biggest difference between India and US. Nobody looks for your education. Nobody asks me what makes you qualifies you to be a Power Builder developer. Do you have a computer science degree? Show me your degree. Show me your GMAT score, TOEFL score, SAT. Nobody. Show me how you can program. Show me your sample code. That was the only question. Nobody has ever asked me any educational background for getting any jobs in this country ever. Now, I might be very different than a lot of other people, but at least I never had that obstacle.
Fantastic. And I think it's also the mindset, right? I mean, you never thought of this as a, that if you didn't have it, you didn't think of this as a handicap, because ek taraf se, I have so many people who are like, oh, I'm not an MBA. How can I do this job? I don't have this degree. How can I do this? So I said, yeah, the degree to abhi bani hai. Isse pehle, Dhirubhai Ambani didn't do an MBA. He could build the biggest, enterprise. So people somehow think that they are not qualified to do something. So how did you...
See, I think that I did 14 years MBA. I told you, right? My MBA lasted for 14 years. That was my MBA, better than any other MBAs.
No, absolutely. And in fact, I do recommend people that instead of, wasting money on doing an MBA, start a company.
Yeah.
That same amount. And even if your company does not succeed,
you will learn.
The learning which you will have will be far greater than what you would spend in an MBA program.
So I think in India, the mentality of failure is a taboo. Like, if you fail, your family is not happy, your friends are happy because you fail. So that kind of culture, I don't know if it has changed. I don't know. But at least when I was there, that was the mentality of kids starting their own business at that time.
Yeah. So tell me, Taj, in your case, you've been extremely successful, but at the same time, you are extremely humble. How do you maintain this balance? Because, normally when people become successful, they are like, they are inaccessible and, not down to earth, etc. But you have somehow been able to maintain that connection to the ground. How did that happen?
I'm definitely not down to earth. The humility came from one of the things in my life. If you would have met me before 2008, you would not even have liked me. I was so arrogant, and that success of being successful in America had gone to my head during that time, because my company was doing very good. I was doing business with Citibank. I was doing better than many other people. I had become very arrogant, and I always tell people I'm Gemini, I'm dual personality. Depending on which personality you are meeting today, you will feel different experience. You will have different experience. Luckily, after that, when I sold that company, that NetPixel, which was my company, which I sold in 2009, during that time, I was very arrogant, very stubborn. And when the financial meltdown happened in 2009, my company was about to go belly up because all my clients were financial clients, and I had to sell the company in that distress. And I sold at a very lower valuation compared to the market valuation. And I went into depression after I sold my company. I got millions of dollars. I did not enjoy that money for a moment also because I did not plan my exit. I did not know what to do. I never knew what to do without doing work. I don't know how to spend 1 hour without having work. Even now it's difficult for me. And then that depression, I went to therapists to be being open about it. I want people to understand that it's okay to go to therapists. A lot of people are depressed. They avoid going to therapists because people think that they are pagal. But not going to therapist is more pagalpan than going to therapist.
Yeah.
I was on a medication for 6 to 12 months for the depression because I just could not control myself at that time. Obviously, my family, my wife were biggest strength of support to me at that time. And they tolerated me at that time, that kind of attitude. And then that changed me as a person. I don't know how to describe that. That what do you call parivartan in that's kind of thing happens, saying that money can come and go, but you as a person have to have a character which people will remember you by. So I tried very hard to do that. And if you know my staff, you know some of my staff, they are with me for 20 plus years, 15 plus years. They follow me from company to company because I really take care of them, and they take care of more than anything. They take care of me. They tolerate me more than I take care of them. I can take care of them only financially, but they take care of me emotionally also, which is hard. So that humility, I still don't think myself as a humble person, because sometimes that second personality comes out. You haven't seen that second personality because I might be hiding that personality from you probably. But if you ask my friend circle, they have seen my second personality. So I'm trying, and this is a work in progress. So more what you see, that's what I want to become eventually.
No, and I can tell you that, see, there is this very important thing about humans, that you cannot eventually hide your true character. And in your case, I now know you enough that at least I can tell you that if you are a Gemini, there is one thing which is higher than others. So I think you're more humble than arrogant, at least. I mean, of course, everybody needs to be arrogant a little bit, but I'm just saying that
little bit, yeah.
That I think at least with whatever interactions I have had, I can tell you that, you are getting more grounded than you were, because you can't fake this. I mean, that's what it is, right?
That's a work in progress, Vishal. That's definitely, I'm very conscious about it, and it's a work in progress.
And that's exactly, I think the point that you are saying it's work in progress only shows how humble you are, right? Because yes, you could have otherwise said, yes, parivartan ho chuka hai. I am absolutely down to
I have that, now I have a habit that as soon as I say something, and then I replay in my head, and if I felt that I should not have said that, I feel bad, and I very easily apologize to people now. That did not happen before 2008. I would say, screw you, I don't have to deal with it. Now I'm very easy to apologize also if I realize that I made a mistake.
Well, and that itself, admitting that you were wrong itself is the first sign of humility, right?
That's the first step.
So tell me something, that in this whole transformation in 2008, which you went through, who were your advisors? Who did you speak to? I mean, I know you did go for therapy, but did you have a friend circle or who were your mentors at that point of time?
Vishal, when you're not happy and you're going through bad time, that is the best time to test your friends. Who are real friends and who are just matlabi friends. And in that 3 to 5 years, I filtered all my friends, and I know who's my real friend and who's not my real friend. Because when you go for some kind of help, even for advice also, you can see in their eyes that they are being happy about you failing or you suffering. You can figure out very quickly. If you're a good observer, you cannot hide that emotion.
Yep.
And that is what I learned in that 3 to 5 years during that tough time. I came to the close to bankruptcy a couple of times during that time, because I was opening companies left and right, because so because I wanted to start again, I opened 7-8 different companies, and every company keep bombing. So I have a list of more failures than successes. But that failures have made me who I am today. If you think that I have any good character, that's because of my failures, I would say.
So tell me something that, you are definitely a good example of learning from failures. But has there been any successes which you credit to all the failures you have got?
Everything I do today is an outcome of a failures. Every strategy I do is an outcome of a failure. Every business I start is an outcome of a failure. I told you last week when you were here that I'm starting a hedge fund. I'm a trader now. I'm not in a recruiting company. My partner Abdullah runs that company. Overnight, I decided to become a trader because something happened. Somebody else was doing trading on my money, and he screwed me. He lied me. I took upon myself saying that, you know what, I will do it myself. And I learned. Even now, every day, I watch 2 hours video about technical analysis and how to trade. And I do very complex trading. It's not a regular stock trading. I do options, futures option. So I learned everything overnight. In last 6 months, I've become a trader. So any failure, if you take, every failure has a lesson. Every failure has a lesson. If you look into it, there is a reason why you failed, right? You chose the wrong person. It was a bad timing. It was a wrong place. It was a wrong strategy, wrong salesperson, wrong team. Mostly it's around people. So my partner who runs my company, Abdullah, I always give him 2 mantras. I told you this also in the past that I only give him 2 mantras. I don't interfere in what he does, but I tell him that if you're not failing enough, you're not trying hard enough. If you're not failing, that means you're not going out of your comfort zone. If you go out of your comfort zone, you're bound to fail. You try 3 things, 1 thing is going to fail, or 2 things is going to fail, or 3 things is going to fail. But you're going to fail. Unless you fail, you're not going to learn anything. The second mantra I give to my executive team is that a bad decision is better than no decision. People have that mentality, family, how do I fire this person, or how do I do this? And they keep prolonging the decision for wrong reasons. I say, you know what? That is the reason, Vishal, I told you, in India, I don't think there is any company which does not have any notice period when person resigns. In my company in Pune, I have 150 people working there. We have no notice period. If you resign, we'll let you go same day. No matter what, because we think that if your heart is not here, I don't want you to be here physically. So that's the one thing, I would rather live with a bad decision rather than prolonging taking a decision. That's 2 mantras I live by.
So procrastination is really the problem. I think clearly in your case, right, whether you're moved from, India to US and leaving the job, so you can decide, right? I think that's really your strength. You are you take a call and move ahead. And if you fail, it's okay, no problem. We'll fix it, right? So that is really the mentality you have been able to develop and grow. But this is exactly the mentality which is lacking. And why do you see people so afraid to take decisions? I mean, you must have now met so many thousands and thousands of people in your life. जो सिंपल चीज हम लोग जो वही बात कर रहे हैं कि let's decide and move ahead.
Yeah.
But in companies, people are not firing useless people. There are so many. I mean, there are a million examples of why people procrastinate. What is your theory around this?
I will, first of all, I will give you my example that how many people you know that at age of 60, they will change their career overnight, from a recruiter becoming a trader overnight, right? That was a mentality I had, I have to do this, right?
But by the way, I have a challenge for you. I don't think so you can fly a plane.
Well,
I'm joking.
Let's see. Well, I will be skydiving very soon, solo.
Okay.
So flying
solo.
A plane.
Solo skydiving?
Yeah. On my 60, no tan. I already did a couple of tandem jumps, but now my plan is to become a certified skydiver. But coming back to your question.
One second. You just said it so casually that my plan is to be a certified skydiver.
Yeah.
Why? What happened suddenly?
It's just you have to keep challenging yourself. On my 50th birthday, I did my tandem jump. On my 60th birthday, I want to do my solo jump. That's it. As simple as that.
Wow.
Nobody's asked me. Nobody has challenged me.
Where are you going for the jump?
So it's in upstate New York. There is a center called Ranch, skydiving ranch. It's like 75 miles from here. And I have a very good friend who has done 1,500 jumps so far. So he's going to be with me.
Wow. Okay.
So coming back to your question about why people don't take decisions, I want to give you an example on a different line, because I work with a lot of talented people in this country who are employed with much big companies. And every time I meet them, everybody has an idea to start their company, but they never start the company. 95% of the people do not start the company. And in my assessment of talking to hundreds, if not thousands of talented people in my career I recruited, the fear of not getting the paycheck on time, the fear of not having medical insurance is the biggest fear for a lot of talented people not starting their companies in this country. And I'm sure it's the same in India also. That fear is the biggest fear. Fear of failure fails people.
So is there anything which one can do to overcome this fear? Is there, can you get trained? Can you get trained? My question is, can you be trained?
Can you train people to how to swim by book or by video? No, right? They have to do it. You have to dive in and do it. You have to just encourage those people. If you have executive team, you have to just give them a comfort saying that I will not fire you for taking a bad decision, but I will fire you if you not take the decision. So if the top leadership cultivates that culture, because everybody is feared of their job. If you have somebody key executive in your company, in your team, they are feared of you. Everybody is feared of somebody, right? Everybody is a chain. It's a continuous chain that somebody is fearful of somebody. If you remove or reduce that fear factor, then give them freedom. Don't yell at them when they make mistake. That is a leader yelling at subordinate when they make mistake is the worst thing anybody can do. You allow them to make mistakes. Then only they will be able to take those decisions without any fear.
No, but again, when you're talking to somebody at a leadership level, I mean, so where, you can give this example is okay, valid for, let's say, middle level or lower level, right? But when you are working as a CEO of a company, at that point of time, the risk appetite is different. But it's
different. You have to cultivate yourself, because you don't have any fear of anybody. You're fearful of yourself. If you make accountable to yourself and you analyze your own decisions every time you take a decision and admit yourself that I might have made a mistake. Admitting yourself, it's very hard for a software programmer to find the bugs in their own code. That's why we have a QA testing team, right?
Yeah.
Who's a QA testing team for you and me? Ourselves. Allow yourself or somebody you trust, could be your spouse, could be your son. I give right permission to my kids to find grammatical mistakes when I speak. If you met Rubina, Rashmina, and Riaz, all those, they have permission from me to correct my language anytime I make a mistake. So give somebody a permission to correct you or get a mentor.
So in fact, the joke in my family is slightly different. So, whenever I type a message, it always is filled with spelling mistakes. So I have told them that the day you get a message from me which has no spelling mistake, assume that I am in danger. That's a code. So I said, if I ever am kidnapped or if I am in danger, you will get a perfectly message with punctuation and comma and full stop. This is the code that I am in danger.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm going to follow that. I'm going to steal that.
So say that the day I speak with full grammar, मतलब समझ लो कि मैं बहुत danger में हूँ. This is my code. So that's the funny part.
Ultimately, the point is that allow yourself, give yourself the freedom to correct yourself sometimes, or give some authority to somebody around you who you trust.
So you've been in the business of recruiting your entire life.
Yeah.
And as you know, that one of the big reasons company fail, I believe it's not money.
Yeah.
It's not technology. It's the people, and especially in today's information age, people, and again in Goki and all my other companies, right? I credit 101% of the success or failure is to the team.
Yeah.
So what is in your opinion that why are companies not able to attract the right talent? Because every person I talk to, अरे यार मेरे को प्रोग्रामर ढूंढ के दो, मैं जिसको भी मिलता हूँ मेरे को एक CTO दे दो, मेरे को एक मार्केटिंग का बंदा. And my point is that this is your main job. So why do you think people cannot attract talent?
Ego plays a very important role in this category, and I have seen this mentality. People don't want to hire people who are smarter than them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you change that, saying that I want to hire only people who are smarter than I am, that might change the thought process of it. You cannot be good in everything, right? So you have to find people who are better than you in things you are not good at. And all these people who are better than you in things you want to hire, they will come with some baggage of ego or some attitude. Obviously, you do not want to ruin your company's culture, but you have to learn how to convert that ego in a positive way of that person. And I think most of the leaders fail that.
So what is, according to you, the most important question somebody should ask anybody when they are getting hired as an employee and as an employer?
So for me, in every job description has a different question. But if you ask in a generic from the startup world, I would have a couple of questions. First of all, I will not give any importance to education. Anybody I had in my company, education was not important. I look for who was a street smart person. I will ask them, give me a story of anything. Doesn't have to be programming, that you were in a difficult situation and how did you come out of that situation? It could be any personal story. I was traveling, I was backpacking, I was doing this, I was doing that. Just ask the most embarrassing situation they were in. Are they open and free to tell you the most embarrassing situation they were in? Are they telling the truth? Like, if it's really embarrassing, then they are telling you the truth, right? I always think that just 1 hour, 2 hour interview does not help select a person. You have to spend more time. If this is a senior person, you have to spend more time with that person, and you have to take that person out of your office environment. Ask them to go for a coffee or a lunch in their car or in their motorcycle. Open up their glove compartment and see how clean, how bad, what is in there. Trust me, it will tell you a lot of things about that person. For key executive people, these are the tricks I tell the people I work with, saying that you should interview like this. It's just not 1 hour or 2 hour or 3 rounds of interviews does not tell you the character of that person. If that person is a cricket player, go and watch that person's game one day, saying that, hey, where are you playing next? I would like to come and see it. And see how they work in a team at that point.
In fact, one tip somebody told me was that if you're interviewing somebody, take them out ideally in a restaurant and see how they behave with the waiting staff. Correct? I think
that's Lagero Munna Bhai. The Lagero Munna Bhai, that's one of the items he had used in that picture also.
Exactly right. So I think it's always the way you treat people who are, let's say in a lower strata than you, or in a lower position than you, shows a lot about what are you as a leader. Now let me flip this question, because you also represent employees. So when employees are looking for employers, what should they be looking for? What should they be asking? Because that's whenever I interview anybody, I ask them, do you have any questions for me? And 9 out of 10 कोई सवाल होता ही नहीं है किसी को, मतलब, which is kind of surprising for me.
This is a great question, Vishal. I would, if I have a time, I would like to conduct a sessions on this, how a candidate should interview, how they should behave, what should they observe, what should they ask. So one of the most important things, the fault of, I don't want to keep saying that Indian mentality or Indian people have this habit, but because I work with that community so much, I'm using that. So please do not take this in a negative way. We always looking for kitna jyada paisa milega, right? That is their biggest worry. Has anybody come and ask you, Vishal, if I join your company, what will be my career growth here? Where do you see me in 5 years in your company?
Very rare.
That is the question I would ask if I'm a candidate. Where do you see me? Okay, the second question I would ask, Vishal, I'm sure you must have interviewed a lot of people. What are you looking for in the candidate? I'm sure everybody has a good education, good programming skill. What is that other wow factor you're looking in that candidate? If I don't have it, I will be honest to tell you that I don't have it and don't hire me. But I want to learn from you, what is the wow factor you're looking in that candidate? Can you just tell me that? Or third question, Vishal, can you tell me your successful hire, and if that person is still in the company, can I speak to that person, how that person grew in your company? Wouldn't that be an interesting question?
Absolutely.
Show me, give me an example of a person you had to fire and give me a reason why you had to fire him. These are the questions I would educate people to ask in the interview. Forget about money. Money is important. Look, I don't want to undersell myself. I'm a Gujarati. I negotiate to the T, So I always tell people, I'm not cheap, I'm frugal. Anything I want to shop, I always say, I'm not cheap, I'm frugal. You should expect negotiations from me, right? So these are the questions are the most, if somebody asks that question to you, you have to think that this person is thinking beyond a job. I always do, when I go to Pune office and train my recruiters, I tell them there are 3 types of jobs in this world. One is 9 to 5 job where you do this job to pay your bills. Nothing wrong with that. There are people who will just do the job, whether they like it or they don't like it, they will still keep doing that job to pay their bills. Second job is that you are a career oriented and you want to see how would you climb the corporate ladder, how you go to from one level to another level within the company or changing the company, because if there is a block in your company, you're going to switch the company to go to the higher position, right? That's fine too. I don't want people to stuck with me for rest of their life. I want to see their benefit also, that they have to grow also. If I don't have the growth opportunity for them, it is my responsibility to guide them and let them go and help them get the job to the next level. That person is going to thank you for rest of your life and also maybe become some kind of help in the future. The third person, which is very rare commodity, you were born to do that job. I was born to be a recruiter. I always tell, I make fun of my recruiter saying that you all are leftover people from the industry. Nobody's parents has told you, hey, bada hoke recruiter banna, right? Nobody has said that. Nobody has thought of becoming a recruiter while they are in the college. Hey, main bada hoke college padh ke main recruiter banunga. You guys are the people, TCS and Infosys did not take you. That's why you have become recruiters. But make a pride in what you do, because you are the most important person in anybody's life, because after family, the recruiter is the most important person in your life, because he gets or she gets you the job where you are able to put food on the table for your family. But recruiters do not have that credibility. But when I recruit, that's the passion I recruit. You see that every time I talk about recruiting, my voice changes. I was talking to you.
No, and I know you have this amazing skill that you can recruit anybody in the world.
I cannot recruit. I can bring person for the interview. I don't say that I can recruit anybody, because recruiting is your company's capability. If that person has a roadmap to grow in that company, then I can sell that company. But I have that ability that 7 out of 10 candidates I can bring to you to at least interview. You are a CEO of the company, I can convince you to take an interview to another company. Even you are a founder of a company, I can convince you saying that, look, Vishal, what's wrong? At least you will know what you're worth in the market. Go and just talk to this person. If the opportunity makes sense, if it's better than what you're currently doing, take the job. Like any employer has a right to say no to the candidate. As a candidate, you also have the same right to say no to the employer. Don't you?
Exactly.
If you don't like the company, you don't take the job. But at least when you go there, you meet a person, you learn how to interview the candidates, you see how much you're worth in the market. Don't you want to know how much you're worth in your market? Look, nobody's forcing you, putting a gun on you to take that job if they like you, right? 1 hour of your time is educational. Wouldn't you just spend 1 hour of your time to go and educate yourself? That's how I will convince anybody.
And you have seen people working in India, people working in America, and you have seen both cultures. So what is the difference between an employee in India doing the same job and an employee in America doing the same job?
Unfortunately, in India, everybody, predominantly 50-60% people fall in that 9 to 5 jobs. They're doing jobs to pay their EMIs. And anybody offers them 2,000 rupees extra, they will jump. There is no loyalty. That's what I have seen in my company, and we changed that. We are the only company in India in recruitment industry with the least attrition rate.
Mm-hmm. And what is a good or a bad attrition rate? How can people understand? Typically, kya hota hai industry?
So in the recruitment industry, 30 people leave every year.
Okay.
In our company, maybe 4 or 5 people out of 100 leave every year.
So you're at say 5% versus 30%.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for programmers in India, everybody's dreaming of coming to America or then go to Europe or go to Australia. So in back of their mind is always there, okay, I have to go to some other country because maybe that impacts their marriage, dowry, I don't know what else is behind the scene, or family stigma.
So tell me, has there been a change in mindset from India? You've been now in the US for so many years and you meet, top companies, top banks, you are talking to the CXO level folks everywhere. What have you seen the change in India's image over the period of time?
Well, you see that Microsoft CEO, Google CEO, that is the change. I don't have to say anything. People are welcoming Indians to that level of positions because all these people have spent a lot of years here and they had some mentors. They look up to something to learn. And if you're willing to learn, this is the only country where based only on merits, you can get to those positions. Mm-hmm. It's a huge change. It's a huge change. I walk into Citibank. Citibank celebrates Diwali nowadays in their office. All major banks, they celebrate Diwali because there are so many Indians. They have welcomed that. So there's a lot of change.
So you think that, Indians are now well respected as far as even senior talent, because pehle tha ki Indian matlab technology, largely your CTO, etc., maximum you would become the technology head of a company.
No, you see that you have an examples now, right? MasterCard CEO, Google, there are many Indian CEOs. The Pepsi CEO, Indra Nooyi, ex-CEO, obviously. We have very good credibility. One thing is that we have a good credibility of work ethics we have.
So on work ethics, right? One of the big things which everybody says is integrity, right? This is a very cliched word used in recruitment, right? We want employees with integrity. Is there a way to test integrity of an employee or a candidate or even a company? How is there some way you have thought about it?
So there is not a test, but the history of that person shows the integrity. If that person has been jumping, there is no integrity or loyalty, right? And the only way to test is try to offer somebody a low level job and pay them more and see if they are accepting the job. So that shows the desire of the money rather than actual work.
Wow, that's interesting.
There are many ways to figure that out. Again, if you spend time with that person, not just 1 hour interview, spend a little bit more time and have them work with your junior person or senior person. And not only you going out with that person for a lunch or coffee, have a junior person of your company go out and see how they treat that person. There are many ways, Vishal. There are many ways to do that. And maybe that is the topic I would love to create some videos on recruiting on all those topics.
Yeah. So Taj, it's quite obvious that, your childhood and your father really influenced a lot of your thinking and, your hustling to where you are today. Now you have, your own kids. Now, you being that same role as a father, how have you been able to help them shape their future?
Wow. That's a loaded question. And especially for any listeners who are immigrated to US and they live in US, they will love this. So the first generation immigrants like me, We call ourselves as a sandwich generation because we have to respect our parents for the values, and we have to respect the freedom of our kids also. Like even now I touch my parents' feet every day. I go out of house every day, but I don't ask my kids to do that to me or to my parents. Their culture is different. So the environment they have grew up in, it's very different. So we being a sandwich generation, we have to balance that value for your parents, and you have to value freedom of your kids. That's what, the sooner you accept that, sooner you implement that in your family will be happy family. Otherwise, you will have drug addicts in your family. You will have kids who don't want to come to home to see parents in your family. You will have all kind of bad elements in your family. The moment you accept saying that it's okay, that freedom what you need here, it's okay, just do with us, come to us, do not be afraid to say anything to us. That will change that family. You have a lot of friends in US, and probably that is the main thing.
So you are the perfect example of the American dream, right? We talk about this whole concept of the American dream.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of people fell victim to this, right? सबको लगता है मैं अमेरिका में जाऊंगा और ये सब हो जाएगा. ऐसा होता नहीं है.
Yeah.
So what is your definition of what should people expect when they are coming and immigrating to America or anywhere else, right? सबको आपकी कहानी सुन के सबको लगेगा कि हाँ मैं भी जाऊंगा, मैं भी एक बिजनेस खोल दूंगा और ये हो जाएगा, right? तो reality क्या है?
Right. Well, willingness to work at $6 an hour in a printing press, willingness to do that and do that with a passion. $6 में भी आज भी वो बॉस मेरे को याद करेगा. $32,000 की सैलरी में जिसके पास I worked for 3.5 years, the guy says that you were the best hire of the century for me. So doing with passion what you do, giving full ability, like इतने पैसे में तो इतना ही मिलेगा, that mentality नहीं चलेगा यहाँ पे. You do your best irrespective of how much you're getting paid. So I want to take a step back a little bit on from the family point of view. Vishal, my daughter Rubina, she's married to an Italian.
Yeah, that's
right. So Sal dated my daughter for 4 years before getting married, and they used to come to our house and we welcomed him during the dating period also. How many Indian parents can do that? Right? So accepting that, where they had a freedom to bring their boyfriend to your house and have drink with you, eat with you, that is the first mindset you have to build, and which is very hard. Well, if you can accept that, then it will be a lot easier for you. There are a lot of families where kids live dual life. उनकी जिंदगी डबल जिंदगी, घर में वो सती सावित्री बन के फिरेंगे, like पंजाबी ड्रेस में, बाहर निकलेंगे स्कर्ट में आ जाएंगे, right? And you have seen in some movies like people do that. If you let that happen in your family, you are bound to fail or bound to have trouble in your family. So coming to America is obviously I will always say good things about it, but you have to be ready to work your ass off and accept the freedom. If you have kids, especially the teenager kids, you should be willing to accept their freedom, and their freedom is more important to them.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So looking at India, US, you are of course I would call you the world citizen. What do you think would have been different for you had you not decided to go to America? Let's say you had decided to live in India itself.
I don't want to think that, because the place I lived, the growth opportunities were so limited. Even now, there are no startups in my hometown. Obviously, I would have moved to Hyderabad, Bangalore. I could have done different. Vishal, I hate to look at the rear mirror always. The only reason I want to look at the rear mirror is for my mistakes, so that I can learn from that and I can remember. I don't want to think, because if in my hometown, BCom was the maximum education I would have taken. I can say that, hey, if I would have done MBA, I would have been in a different position. I had an opportunity to go to Pune to do MBA. I could have been a different person. But because of my involvement with my father, I could not do that. So I hate to look at the rear mirror, Vishal. I don't want to even think what would I have done if I would have stayed in India. I would have done something nice.
So clearly, I mean, given all your skills, you never know. You would have possibly built an Infosys sitting in India. I mean, but of course, that's a point for a different discussion.
Yeah.
So Taj, you've had such an amazing life. Of course, you've gone through your struggles, but now you are pretty well to do. You have a great, happy family. You are going to be celebrating your 60th birthday, but you still want to do new things. You still want to start a new company. What is driving you? Abhi, when will you say ki bas abhi, abhi thoda aaram karte hain? What is driving you now?
Look, I don't want to give any cliche answers. Like, greed and money is passion. That drives a lot of people. Many people fail to admit and accept that. I will be the first one to accept that. And you know that I connected to a couple of your guests on the podcast, to Dash, Divyanshu, Ronak, and I connected with them directly. I could have sent you an email saying that, hey, mujhe Dash se introduce kara do. But I connected with them directly. And while talking to Dash asked me a question, how you describe yourself. And I said, I'm a capitalist Buddha. Mm-hmm. So I love capitalism, but I love doing charity work. I would like to do something for my hometown, which is very backward. I would like to do for girls' education in my life, because in my hometown or any small town in India, if a family has to choose to educate between boy and girl, they're obviously going to choose boy. And girls are left out. So I want to work in those areas. So I believe in Osho, ke pehle kamao, fir daan karo, right? So the more the money, the more good work I can do. I don't have any wishes कि अभी Rolls Royce लेना है, ये लेना है, वो लेना. I'm done. I'm past that. I'm 60 years old. I've done everything. I've lived a real American dream. Now it's time that I do my duty and I give back also in some or other form. The only form I know is money. And for that, I have to keep making more money.
That's a good way of putting it. But at the same time, yes, you have also, I don't know about the Rolls Royce, but clearly you have indulged in Bentleys and Ferraris. So what was the first? Normally, Indians will buy a Honda or a Toyota. We were discussing that, right? So when was the first time you decided to indulge? Because not many Indians do that, right? I know a lot of families, but koi ye Ferrari bahut कम लोग खरीदते हैं. ये क्या हुआ? What happened to you?
So my son-in-law, they were all talking about all these cars, and they always talk about how glamorous it is to drive into this car. So one day, I just woke up and I said, I want to buy this car, and just went online and bought this Audi R8 online. My first exotic car.
Audi R8. Yeah. That's one of my favorite cars.
I still love it. I still miss it. I'm going to end up buying that again for my retirement. I still love that car. So I just bought it online and it got delivered to my house, and kids were more happy than I was. So my son and my son-in-law influenced me in many ways for those kind of things. But obviously, I like those cars also. And
so you first got the R8. Then what was your second car?
The second was Ferrari California. Then it was Bentley Flying Spur, and then now the 458 Ferrari Italia.
The yellow one, I loved it. I drove it just last week. Yeah. And you got the Tesla, but now you have booked something even more amazing. Please tell me about your
Lucid.
Yeah. So tell me about Lucid. What is it?
So Lucid is a new company in EV electric vehicles category, and it's a luxury. It's like a Mercedes S-Class in the electric vehicles. So if you go to Lucid, their Dream Air Edition, I'm the first 500 cars I have booked, the Dream Edition.
Wow.
And
apart
it's a luxury.
From cars, you also have a passion for shoes. I mean,
I knew you were going to ask that question.
I saw your...
Why you're embarrassing me?
No, I just want to understand that, how did you start collecting shoes?
It's just I love shoes and different colors, different styles, different brands. I just love it.
So now, how many shoes do you have? Have you ever counted them?
Over 300.
Yeah. Well, all I can tell everybody is that Taj just has a room to store his shoes. That's how mad he is about shoes. But I just want...
anytime I'm depressed or not happy, I buy a couple of shoes and it makes me happy.
Well, they say that there is nothing like retail therapy, right? And I think in your case,
so that's my shoe therapy.
That's your shoe therapy. But one interesting thing I want everybody to know, while we all think of Taj as somebody who's buying Ferraris and expensive shoes, there is a very interesting thing about Taj, that he never travels business class on a flight. And there is a reason for that, right, Taj? So why don't you share that reason?
So I don't want to forget my roots, where I come from, the drudgery, the hardship. Flying coach class reminds me of that hardship. And what I do is that every time I fly a coach class, I calculate the difference between the business class and coach class, and I donate that money for charity in my hometown.
Amazing.
So it keeps me humble. It reminds me the hardship, and it does something good also. So that's I don't know. It's a very weird reason, Vishal. I don't like to talk about it, but somehow you remembered I mentioned that to you once.
Well, I remember everything you mentioned to me.
It's a very weird reason. I could have done both, but going into that hardship reminds me my roots to me, that where I came from.
No, and I think you just mentioned a very important point, right? Going through hardships. And I think current challenge is that a lot of people don't understand what hardship is. लोगों को लगता है मेरा इंटरनेट कनेक्शन स्लो है तो मैं हार्डशिप हो गया है, or people think that just because my phone is still not, it's only iPhone 11 and not iPhone 12, I'm having such a hard life.
Yeah.
So what do you think people should do, especially when they are having children or they have other people around them who don't understand the concept of hardship?
I don't know the answer for this question. If you figure out the answer, let me know.
No, I thought that we can ask the capitalist Buddha, right? So you are at one end investing in the most expensive cars, but on another end, you are going through hardship in what, you could own a private jet if you want, but you choose to travel economy class and donate the money to charity. That's something that shows your thought process, right? Your DNA underneath is very different.
See, I told you I'm a dual personality, right? So one personality buys Ferrari, another personality does this. There is no relationship between these two personalities.
No, there is an absolute relation, right? I think, when you described yourself as the capitalist Buddha, clearly the Buddha is taking over the capitalist. I can see that, right?
Yes.
So I think while you started as, somebody like you yourself said that you were too arrogant and too this, but now you are becoming a lot more aware, a lot more generous. And let me use the word, you're becoming a seeker, right? I mean, I know the amount of courses you do. I'd even dragged you to come to TED with me.
Yeah.
And
it was fun though. Thanks for doing that, by the way.
Yeah, and I think I also remember that, every time I'm in New York, you are just dying to come and we are like literally doing nothing together, right? And that's a quality of a seeker, which I really appreciate.
You are a giver, Vishal, and there is so much to learn from you because you travel so much, you speak to so many people. I'm always curious. I'm always hungry to learn, and always hustling. So curiosity, hungry, and hustling. These are the three mantras.
So tell me, what are your life hacks? I mean, with whatever you have learned, you're traveling, have you figured out some hacks in your own life, which you think is helping you?
There could be many hacks, Vishal. Nothing comes to my mind right now. I don't think there are common things, Vishal. I don't know if I would call them hacks. No, nothing at this time. No, I cannot think of any hacks right now.
That's amazing. So you're not even wanting to tell us any of your secrets, but that's fine. We will.
No, there's nothing secret about, like, I know you ask this question a lot, and I hear the answers of other people. I don't have anything like that. I'm very chilled person like that. I don't have any special things to do or anything like that.
So tell me, are you a lot into books? Do you read a lot of books?
I used to in the past, but I don't have an ability to read more than 20, 30 pages at a time. And it takes too long for me to read the book. So I switched to audiobooks now. So that's what I listen to. But I'm not an avid reader like most of your guests are. And like, I saw people like, read thousands of books in their life. I'm not an avid reader.
So you don't read. You listen to audiobooks. So what is your biggest source of learning?
Being curious. Obviously, internet is a big tool. Flipboard is my favorite app. I cannot live without that app, which accumulates all the different news for me in one app. I spend at least 1 hour every day. So that could be my hack. Reading Flipboard for 1 hour every day is my everyday routine.
Wow.
At least 1 hour.
1 hour. Huh?
Yeah, at least 1 hour.
Look, I also remember that you have a very, very interesting favorite Bollywood actress. And I think that also comes to your whole feeling of actually directing a movie at some point of time.
Correct.
Please tell us more about your favorite Bollyywoood actress.
Vishal, you're embarrassing me now in front of everybody.
I'm not embarrassing
My family is going to be listening.
So what's wrong in having a favorite Bollywood actress?
My favorite Bollywood actress is Aishwarya Rai Bachchan. Beauty with brains, the dignity, the way she represents India wherever she goes. All the interviews she has given in US, the way she represents India, I don't think anybody represents that way, in dignified way. I have a dream that's only one check item before I die. If I live long, I would like to direct a movie casting Aishwarya Rai in any role, however long it takes for me to do that. I will need your help. I need to assist somebody before I make a movie. I'm not going to go and say, hey, here is money, let's make a movie. I have to learn hard way. Anything I do, I have to learn hard way. So I'm going to be okay to be a spot boy to an AD. Whatever I have to do to learn the tricks of the trade, I will do that.
We only have one guy who can learn from, that is Vikas, who's our in-house movie director.
Yeah. No, Nikhil Advani is there in your database.
Yeah, of course. But I'm just saying that, Vikas is the tough taskmaster, right?
Yeah.
We remember doing a shoot with him with Shabana Azmi.
In Central Park, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think...
So we can say that at least for 5 minutes, I assisted a director in a movie.
Exactly. Yeah, we all did. Did.
Yeah.
So Taj, like I said, your life has been so inspiring. You have done so many things. And you are still so young, So where do you see yourself in the next 10, 20, 30 years? What will you be doing?
So Vishal, this might sound very weird. Again, I don't make any long-term plans. I take things as they come. Maybe I have a plan for next 3 to 5 years tops. I want to start a hedge fund. I want to start a private equity company for staffing and recruitment industry while doing all the Buddha work, right? So capitalism is one part of me, and Buddhism is one part of me, doing some charitable work and good work. The only desire left in my life is to direct a movie. That's one of the biggest thing in my life.
And like we say, right, 100%, I'm sure once you have thought about it, I am 101% confident that you will do it. So I don't think so. That should be a challenge anymore. I think one last point before, I know we've gone for almost 2 hours, but I think one last point, and I know with you, I can keep talking endlessly. One last point for you, Taj, is that, given your entire experience, in US, America, India with the recruitment and all these things, is there any advice you could give yourself now? If you had to give an advice to yourself, a younger self of you, or any other youngsters, right? Because I see today's youth are very confused.
Mhm.
They don't know what to do. They don't want to put in hard work. I think suddenly we have reached a stage where, the times which you and I went through were much different than the people who are going through today. So what is your advice to them? How do they experience hardship? How do they do what you and I have been talking about?
It's a very loaded question, Vishal. That could be in another 1 hour session, but I will try to keep as brief as possible. The biggest problem is with parents enforcing their desires, their wishes, their dreams on the kids. So as a parent, you have to get out of your children's life first. Give them freedom to make decisions and give them freedom to make mistakes. That is one biggest thing I see in our diaspora, that everybody wants certain thing. Whatever parents wants, the kid has to do that. So my request to all the parents is that give freedom to your kids. Let them do what they want. Now, from the kids' point of view, follow your passion. All this is our cliche. Be realistic. Figure out what's realistic and try to be passionate about what realistic is. One day I cannot say that I want to climb the Mount Everest, right? It's BS to me. That's follow your passion. No, passion with reality. I would say be real and bring passion in what's real rather than being passionate. I'm passionate about making movies. Is that real for me right now? Probably not. So do what's real and real will become passion. So that is the most important thing. Do not afraid of changes. I was afraid to leave New York and move to California. In 98, I had a choice either to move to California or go to New Jersey. I used to live in Queens, New York, which is not a good neighborhood at that time. So I had a choice between going to New Jersey and California, and I chose the easy way. I chose the New Jersey was close by. I had friends. California, I did not know anybody. I always tell to my son is that one of the things, if I had to redo in my life, in 98, instead of coming to New Jersey, I would have gone to California. And that might have changed my trajectory of my life. Knowing who I am, how much risk I take, I bet everything I have all the time. I have no fear of losing everything. Even now at the age of 60, I have no fear of losing everything. I know that I will make enough money to feed my family at any given time. So the advice to kids would be, the new generation would be, do not take any decision because of complacency or fear. Do not become complacent and do not be fearful.
So is there any movie which you recommend everybody should watch, which has inspired you, given that you have such a huge interest in movies?
Godfather is my favorite movie. Obviously, in India, Three Idiots would be my favorite movie. My favorite movies are Dil Chahta Hai, Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, Dil Dhadakne. These are fun movies, but as a lesson, Three Idiots would be a good movie. But my classic movie all time, anytime I can watch is
Godfather. Amazing.
Because the family values and the discipline of running a business,
that
you can learn a lot
an
of
encyclopedia in itself, right? I mean, the entire Godfather series is been great. But like I said, Taj, it's always a pleasure chatting with you, and I think even now we went on, and I think it was amazing to listen to your ideas and thoughts, and I think in this case, clearly, this is just part one of our discussion. I think we'll have to certainly do part 2 and part 3 very soon. But I think, like I said, right, there are very few people, and I think you have defined yourself perfectly, right? The capitalist and the Buddha. And a lot of people think that these two things cannot be same. People always think that either you are Buddhist and you leave everything, and you are capitalist and you can't think about, charity or all of those things, right? I mean, you have been able to merge both these things, and it is quite obvious in your businesses, your career choices, your willingness to give back to the society. And this is a very, very rare quality. And I just hope that, everybody listening here can take inspiration from this and move out of their comfort zone and, not procrastinate and hustle their way. So once again, thanks a lot, and looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Anytime, Vishal. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show. I hope your listeners will get some information out of this. And I wish you good luck with Goki and everything you do, because everything you do is awesome.
Well, this is one of the awesomeness we are doing together. Thank you, Taj.
Yes,
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, thewholetruthfoods.com, PayPal, Cred, and Siat. Thank you so much for working with us. We really appreciate it. First up this week, let me tell you about Cyrus Says. We featured popular YouTuber and actor Prajakta Kohli, who took us through a journey of content creation. We also had conversations with Vasanti Hariprakash and Sachin Kalbag this week. Really great conversations. Do check those out. Vineet Kanabar goes solo this time on Storytellers and Storysellers as he talks about his favorite IPL ads and how brands have been making content around the Cricket League. On The Habit Coach, Ashton was joined by Arjun and Sumesh of the Fighting Goat podcast to talk about fitness for combat sports like the mixed martial arts. On Nankari, Sadaf and Archit discussed the diet and lifestyle of athletes with the host of the Millennial Athlete, Shok Ramchandra, who is also a pro badminton player and coach. Ambarana opens the 4th season of Know Your Kanun with a list of things he has planned on the show for us, including episodes on immigration law and on career prospects for law students. The IPL season's on and we've definitely got you covered. Tune in to the Edges and Sledges podcast if you're looking for English, and if you're looking to listen to something in Hindi, definitely check out Khel Neeti. Both are great shows with great takes. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
If you love cricket, listen up. The Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast is here for you. Hosted by DJ, Varun, and me, Ashwin, we bring a fun, fresh fan's point of view to talking all things cricket. Sometimes it's just the three of us, sometimes we have guests, including current and former international cricketers. For new episodes every week, check out the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts.